Hi students, this video will round up week 5 topics. So this will be the last one required in your notes for week 5, and that I'll pull week 5 quiz questions from all of these videos in the week 5 folder. Okay, so the previous video was about statuses, more details about statuses. This is more details about roles. Remember, every status has a role that goes with it. You do not have a status without behavioral expectations that go along with that position that you occupy in society. And our term for those behavioral expectations that go along with those positions in society, our vocab term is roles, okay? So, there are lots of different ways that we can live out our roles in life. For instance, in the set of norms that exists in a society, there are abstract expectations for each of the statuses that you occupy. So there's like an ideal set of behaviors that are assumed somebody is going to do those behaviors when they occupy a role. We call this role expectation, the assumption about what behaviors and how those behaviors will be exercised when you occupy that status. But that's really an ideal case, and most of us, frankly, myself included, and then lots of, all of you are saying, yes, honey, amen, we don't always follow society's expectations for the status that we occupy at that particular moment in time. So we also have a term related to roles called role performance, and this refers to the actual way we act out the behaviors associated with our status. Sometimes as a teacher, I can't follow or I can't meet a deadline that I have tried to promise you will happen. Like I will have all of project one graded by XYZ date. That's my ideal expectation. I want to provide you with that feedback that you expect of me as soon as possible. I want to give you those grades that you expect of me as soon as possible, right? Don't you want it? That's the ideal expectation, but I can't always do that. As a wife, as a homemaker role, my house is dirty most of the time. Messy, at least, yes, I need to sweep the floor much more often than I do. It's the actual behavior that we do associated with the status that we hold. By the way, my house is always way cleaner when I have like guests coming over. So we need to maybe have a revolving door of guests, and my house would be much cleaner because the role expectation that they have apparently has a little bit higher priority than the folks who live in the house with me, apparently. We'll have to investigate that in psychology class later. But role performance is the actual behavior that we do when we are engaging in the behaviors that are expected of the status that we occupy, okay? Also, I don't have it on the board, but there's a whole lot. Like when you're reading in chapter 4, I think there's like 6 different examples of roll something, with the word roll in front of a vocabulary word. There's one that's pretty interesting, I think, that has to do with role performance. It's called role distancing, and you find it quite a lot with college students. I've noticed you are in college to work toward a career, and quite often there are jobs that you take right now that you don't want someone to see your permanent social identity as being connected to that. So for instance, if you are right now going to college and working at Bass Pro Shops or something, if one of your teachers or if somebody, one of your parents' friends sees you there, probably the conversation will turn into, I'm doing this job to work my way through college so I can be a substance abuse counselor, or whatever the overall long-term goal is for employee and career and occupation in our society. So sometimes, even though we must occupy a status in society, some of those statuses that are intentionally designed to be temporary, like student or part-time employee while you are a student. Sometimes we engage in behaviors that attempt to kind of control the image that we have in society. We can call that role distancing, where we want to make sure, hey, I'm only working at Subway Sandwich right now to work my way through medical school. Even though I'm selling those sandwiches to people I'm in class with at medical school, I might intentionally mention, when is the biology test? Oh yeah, I'm only working here until I can get that internship and really work toward my career. I need money for bills or whatever, right? These kinds of behaviors are called role distancing because we have some statuses that we occupy that we don't always want to be associated with. So we try to, create those barriers in our behaviors too. Okay, so role strain and role conflict is something that as college students or as parents or as boyfriends, girlfriends, wives, whatever, we all experience this. If you have a status that you occupy in life and the role expectation associated with that particular status is too stressful and you can't live up to the societal expectations, that's called role strain. Role conflict is very similar, but you're looking at the many roles in your role set. For instance, I've mentioned to you that I'm a teacher, so there's my employee. I'm a wife, so there's my marital status. Until very recently, I was taking care of my elderly father. I was caregiver. I had a whole lot of statuses in my status set. And all of those things had requirements associated with them. And sometimes when we have too much on our plates, we can't live up to the expectations. Our role performance suffers and something's got to give. If your status is mama and you have multiple children, you can't always give the same amount of mothering to all of those children in your household. That would be an example of role strain. But if you are a mother and a student and an employee, you've got a role set in which just those three that I mentioned are probably going to sometimes overlap in conflicting ways, and you're not going to be able to take your chemistry midterm and go to the piano recital for junior on the same night because those motherly duties and the scholarly duties are going to cause stress, and they're too much for you. You can't, one of them's going to have to give. Skip the midterm, skip the recital, you decide, right? So that's when role conflict takes place. Okay, and please remember that all of these things are connected to social structure overall. So statuses and roles that we've discussed right now in week 5, we're going to transition into a discussion of social groups in week 6 and get even more micro. But the connection, kind of the glue between the social institutions and the social groups that we're going to look at next week is this status and role section, where you can clearly see the connection between the social institution that we discussed in previous lectures, and then the status and role that comes from those social institutions, the norms with your role that comes from those cultural expectations on the macro scale. And then how do we live those things out? This role performance expectation, we're going to carry that into our social groups, and then even do a look at Charles Horton Cooley and George Herbert Mead and another sociologist called Irving Goffman, one of my favorite guys. And we're going to look at some micro scale behaviors associated with social structure and our position within it. So I will see you next time for that. Bye.